and the thing I had repressed and run from all my life. For a brief moment I thought I could stop running that day, but I didn't have the nerve to tell my wife the truth. Instead, I said nothing. I've never been much for self-revelation. In 2 decades of public life, I've always approached the limelight with extreme caution. Not that I kept my personal life off limits. Rather, the personal life I put on display was a blend of fact and fiction. Dishonesty creates not only a lack of truth, but a tangle of truths. I invented overlapping narratives about who I was, and contrived backstories that played better not just in the ballot box, but in my own mind. And then, to the best of my ability, I tried to be the man in those stories. In this way, I'm not at all unique. Inauthenticity is endemic in American politics today. Those who would be leaders are all too often tempted to become what we think you want us to be. Not leading at all, but following our best guess at public opinion. We tailor our public positions to reflect poll results and consultants' advice, then feed that data back to you in flattering ways. Everything from clothing we wear to places we vacation is selected data for political gain. Even the food we eat is chosen with strategic calculation. The public square has never been so clamorous with deception. This is, in fact, the defining characteristic of American political life today, and it is a dangerous, slippery slope. For too many politicians, winning has become the end goal of politics, trumping both ideology and ethics. An ambitious politician quickly learns, as I did, to countenance and even sponsor fundamentally corrupt behavior while insulating himself, for as long as he can, behind a buffer of deniability. I'm not even talking about criminal misconduct, the kind of thing that leads to the occasional political corruption scandal. I'm talking about the hundreds of ways that politicians or their representatives can push the envelope on ethics, morals, and truth in our quest for power. In my experience, ethical compromises are not just a shortcut to office. For all but the wealthy, they are all but compulsory. The political backrooms where I spent much of my career were just as benighted as my personal life, equally crowded with shadowy strangers and compromises, truths I had hoped to deny. I lived not in one closet, but in many. Even this is not uncommon. In the months since I resigned my office and my public trust, I have learned how the pressures of society seem to force so many of us into deep denial and disintegrated lives. Many people have confided in me about their own struggles for authenticity, whether in their jobs, their marriages, or their spiritual lives. Like me, they felt their sense of self fracture beneath the pressures of social conformity, feeling helpless to reverse their course, even as they longed for the courage to do so. At times, I've wondered if we're a nation of individuals careening down the wrong highway. The true story of my life, what the composer Ned Rorem called the cinema of myself, had no connection with the script I polished for public consumption. And it was a cinema with no audience but one. It seems ridiculous to me now, but in all those years I never once spoke the word gay about myself. Not in a heart-to-heart with a friend, not in a therapy session, not even in a sexual liaison, of which there were plenty, not even to go on. Even in private, we never gave words to our love affair. We called it this, or simply us. I once told him, standing in the governor's mansion, I would leave all this for you. But neither of us ever used the word gay. Oh, I knew it was my word, my reality. I'd been certain almost all my life that God made me different. And at least since the age of 13, I've been coping with this circumstance by not coping with it, by adopting artifices, changing myself rather than the world that would not embrace me. I chose the coward's route, courting girlfriends as a teenager and as an adult, carrying on misguided romances for theatrical effect, marrying 2 women who deserved better. And in my private moments, I mined every book I could find on homosexuality, not for affirmation, but for tricks to use in curbing my desires. In other words, I managed my homosexuality, or thought I did. Many people my age, born late in the baby boom, long ago came to terms with being gay, and have thrived despite daunting obstacles. Moreover, in the past 30 years, they have transformed the culture in ways large and small. Mine is the generation that built a mighty gay rights movement, that battled AIDS, that has given our culture legacies as diverse as the searing introspection of Paul Monet's memoir, Becoming a Man, and the mainstream comedy of Will and Grace. Yet through most of these years I have lived at arm's length for myself, unable to use my self-knowledge to live an honest life. I will say in my defense that it's an awful thing to expect a child of 13 to pit himself against everything he holds dear, from his outsized ambitions to his beloved family and the church of his salvation, for the sake of something so small as private happiness. I could not do it at 13, and once I had started down the path of self-denial, I saw no alternative but to stay the course. But the result was that I became the married, blackmailed homosexual that I reviled. And for too many years I did nothing to stop it. There were moments at 19 and 21, here and there in my 30s and 40s, when the ripping misery of this life became too great. Moments when I thought about becoming gay, and all that entails. In the end, though, sheer willpower always brought me back to the community I cherished, the bike paths of Carteret, New Jersey, where I grew up, and the precincts of Trenton, where there were no gay lawmakers, just heterosexuals and me. I lived those years in constant fear of discovery, a flutter of pure panic skating constantly on the lining of my diaphragm. I never forgot for a minute that I was what my childhood friends mocked, what I thought my parents would reject, what my loving God supposedly condemned to limitless suffering. I stayed within the bounds of the culture I was born into, those borders like the invisible pet fences that train a dog to stay close to home by promising electric shocks if he ventures beyond the property line. I sat on the porch of my lonely self-denigration, sure of nothing but the perils in the yard. This was a sick-making existence. I suppose that goes without saying. Looking back, I realize how often in my life the voices of prejudice emanated, not from the prejudiced outside world, but from my own mind, bent against me. During my first run for governor in 1997, I remember sitting in the back seat of a campaign car as it pushed north along the beautiful Garden State Parkway, and glancing exhaustedly out of the window to see one of those enormous green parkway signs welcoming the river of cars. In a moment of wishful fantasy, I looked up and saw, or imagined I saw, my own name, not the name of Christie Todd Whitman, the sitting governor I was running to unseat, at the bottom of the sign. Yet, this was no happy hallucination. Across the daydream billboard, I saw someone had spray-painted the word, homo. I shook my head to clear the image, but it didn't go away, and I broke into a cold sweat. Of course, this was nothing more than a trick of imagination, but its truth was inescapable. I might be gaining in the polls, I thought. I might one day be governor, maybe even run for president. But no matter how I lived my life, I would still be a despicable thing at my core. If I had been handed as a teenager the groaning platter of secrets and half-truths that would feed me till middle age, I never would have had the courage to pretend to be heterosexual. But I can't imagine I would have pursued my heart's desires forthrightly either. Such was my self-hatred. Twice I contemplated the priesthood, more often suicide. It was only when I stood beside my beautiful wife and loving parents one August morning at the New Jersey State House and declared, "My truth is that I am a gay American," that my stomach's alarm system finally diffused, and my solar plexus went still for the first time in my life. The writer Armistead Maupin once said, "My only regret about being gay is that I repressed it for so long. I surrendered my youth to the people I feared when I could have been out there loving someone. Don't make that mistake yourself. Life's too damn short." He was right. I lost 47 years. The life I've led since then has been truthful, but it hasn't all been easy. In the weeks after announcing my affair with Golan, my career and my marriage slipped away, both excruciating losses. And one cold fall afternoon in the last days of my term,